Looking over FE4 script remind me how oddly terse it is. It can remove quite a bit of nuance from everyone. Well, you know the reason for that, right? We were talking about this last stream, but Kaga's racism moments really bleed into the script. So, in an interview, Kaga said he based Verdane off of Persia, because he believes Persia to be a barbarian nation. And he said that he based, the noble houses of, the next chapter, chapter 2, off of the less civilized Spanish, which he means Muslims. So that is pretty bad. Pretty bad. Not gonna mince words. He's a racist motherfucker, and it bleeds through into parts of FE4's like story and theming. Now I think that you can enjoy a work of fiction that was made by a bad person, even if some of that bad person's badness has bled in, but I think you need to be able to acknowledge it and like look out for it, right? Which is where sort of I'm actually not sure how I'm gonna handle certain portions of the story, because there's a scene in Gen 2 where Seliph is like in the temple and finds out, like, it turns out the death cult, this evil religion that worships Satan, was actually persecuted by people who thought they worshiped Satan, and then it turns out those people were right about worshiping Satan. And that, I've seen some people, talk about, like, oh, you know, it's about the cycle of violence. It's about how, like, you know, they struck back and the cycle of violence will keep going forever. And I just don't think that's a valid reading, because I'm sorry, it's about how this religion actually worships devils and is evil and we need to kill them, by a man who based 2 of the evil nations on Muslims because he thinks they're less civilized than non-Muslims. I don't think you need to really read between the lines to make the connection as to what perhaps was intended by this. What evil religion is worshipping devils in Kaga's mind, right? Tearing Saga is something that I'm not interested in playing anymore. Yeah, Tearing Saga has its own issues. It sort of runs with the same theming as FE4, and for that reason it has, like, its own racism moment. Kaga has an obsession with blood, and how certain bloods just make you better than others. Which again, like, when combined with the other stuff he said, already the blood stuff is a red flag, obviously. And like the idea of right here, you know, it's passing down the extra special bloodlines to people to make them better warriors in a crusade. You know, it's not that subtle, and the imagery is everywhere once you know what to look for, right? It's not great. It's not great. You know, I actually made an Ice Rider video about my thoughts on how, what I like about the story, and how there's the sort of, Sigurd is blindly pushing forward and you as the audience are kind of tricked into siding with him for a certain amount of time. And I still like that takeaway from me, from my consumption angle, right? But I've actually been thinking about it over the past couple of days, and I don't know know if Kaga intended for the player to think Sigurd ever did anything wrong. You know, obviously, I don't have an insight into Kaga's brain, so the whole, like, you're along for the ride until you realize Sigurd was wrong thing, that's my interpretation. But it could very well be that Kaga thinks, like, yes, Sigurd, kill the barbarian nations. And then, oh, but then this evil schemer has corrupted your beautiful white army. Which, like, that's another Islamophobic fucking conspiracy theory, right? So, it could be that that's what we're supposed to take away. And, like, if that's the intended takeaway, then that's bad. And that's the thing about, like, engaging with media that was written by a person whose politics and race views and stuff you find objectionable is I think that you are able to sort of come to your own conclusions about stuff. And so what the conclusion I'm running with is that we're along for the ride, or the enjoyment I'm getting from the story is we're along for the ride, but Sigurd is, you know, conquering nations and subduing other sovereign people, and that's bad. And if Kaga intended something different, well, you know, death of the author, right? I personally, at the risk of getting political, I don't think conquering another nation is actually good. Elliot has fled? Very well. Leave him to lick his wounds. We're done here. Withdraw. Crests aren't based on racist stereotypes. I mean, so oh god, do we have to get into Three Houses discourse? I do think Three Houses has some similar issues to FE4. Not identical ones, obviously. It's trying to do like a caste system story, right? But yeah, as Faulty Video says, so there's two evil underground religions manipulating everything. One of which is quite literally lizard people. And the whole lizard people conspiracy does originate from anti-Semitic, like, stuff, right? So there is some ickiness to it. It also presents the character who wants to sort of get rid of this caste system and introduce a meritocracy or whatever, as not evil, but sort of well-intentioned, yet like ultimately misled. Like, she teams up with the other evil religion, because it's two evil underground manipulative religions fighting each other in this sort of proxy war. And she teams up with the other one, the one that wants to, like, destroy humanity in a different way. And I also just don't like the Three Houses writing. Like, why must you continue to reconquer? Why must you continue to kill in retaliation? Like, that sort of shit, right? The other evil faction that actually ruined her life. Yeah. Like, I understand that Edelgard is a controversial character to talk about, and I do think that the whole, like, she's a fascist thing is very silly. But also, I don't think she's written super well. I don't think she's written super well, and in fact, I think that bad writing sort of takes away from a lot of what the game is, like, kind of trying to go for. In terms of its themes. And I don't think that should be a controversial thing to say, but it's Three Houses discourse, so it will be. I don't think any of the characters are written, any of the main characters are written particularly well, or at the very least, they're not written consistently. And, you know, you can say, like, oh, well, you know, obviously they're gonna act different based on what side Byleth takes and what other events there are right, and there's some amount of that, right? Like, I think Dimitri having a total breakdown versus not total breakdown, dependent on when he figures out that Edelgard is the Flame Emperor, is believable. Although, I think Dimitri, like, magically recovering from his mental breakdown because Rodrigue dies is its own form of silliness. But at the very least, like, his difference, I believe, and some of the characters, like, siding with Byleth versus against Byleth, depending on stuff, I also believe. But then you get stuff like, you know, Edelgard, you get stuff like, I mean, Claude just gets completely written out of the story. Even within his own route, he radically changes. Like, he's investigating Rhea and figuring out her manipulations and stuff, and then they didn't really have a direction for him to go in part 2, so he just does what Dimitri does. He just becomes the Silver Snow route. The writing of Three Houses is so rough, but it's hashtag the best writing in the series according to its fans. I think that the reason people like the Three Houses writing is, a lot of the side characters are really well written. But that's also true of a lot of side characters in other Fire Emblems. Like, I mean, let's use the series as punching bags, right? Fates and Awakening. There's some side characters in Fates and Awakening that are quite well written as well. Verdant Willed is Silver Snow if it was good. My first playthrough of Three Houses was Silver Snow. I picked Edelgard because Hot Red Girl. And then... Oh shit, are we dead? And then when she was revealed to be the villain, so basically I picked Edelgard, I say Hot Girl, I picked Edelgard because I was like, yeah, whoops, we died. I picked Edelgard because that was when I was first, like, transing, so I was like, I'll pick the girl one. But then I got so bored of the monastery in my first playthrough that I just missed the option to go Crimson Flower entirely. Because by the time I got to, like, chapter 8-ish, I was so fucking bored of the monastery. I was like, this is actually god-awful. That I just, like, quit, right? So I also didn't get a dancer in my first playthrough because I didn't know about the dancer festival because I quit the monastery. Bum, ba-da-da, ba-da-da-da. So, because of that, I ended up going Silver Snow, and I was like, wow, that's really cool that Fire Emblem, like, takes your lord away halfway through. That's such a, like, really cool and creative decision. I didn't think modern Fire Emblem devs would be brave enough to give you a character who you then don't get to keep, right? Especially the lord, like, she's a selling point, and I was hooked. I was looking forward to playing through Blue Lions and Golden Deer in order to find out how do Dimitri and Claude leave as well. Like, what's the reason that they leave too? And so I thought it was the coolest shit ever, and then it turns out that it's just an alternate path, and it's retreading Golden Deer but without a lord. And I was like, oh, that's actually kind of lame. Believe it or not, Fire Emblem The Last Promise does that premise better than Three Houses does, because you can't avoid the thing that takes away your lord, which I think is much cooler. And when your storytelling is worse than The Last Promise, I think you made a mistake somewhere along the line. I guess the Throuses devs couldn't handle the weight. You, Divisian developers, how much weight can you handle? I feel like Silverstone was written before Verdant Wind, which kind of makes both worse. Yeah, because, like, Claude spends most of White Clouds, like, stealthily investigating Rhea, and he's, like, not sharing his findings with Byleth, but it's very clear he's figuring out that, like, because the church did some manipulations and shit. Like I said, Three Houses would need another 2 years at least. I don't think time would have fixed it. I think the issues with Three Houses, I think the issues with Three Houses needed a different writing team. I don't trust the team that wrote Three Houses to write a good story in a longer amount of time. I think it just needed a new writing team. Or if not just a fully new team, like some new people, right? Because the thing is, there's like the library where they have like world development stuff and right? So I feel like they had plenty of time to like do stuff. It's just a matter of the skill issue. I was so fucking intrigued with what Claude was doing in White Clouds, but then it sort of went nowhere. I haven't played Three Hopes, or I have, but I didn't like it. And I like the Warriors playthrough. I like Fire Emblem Warriors, like OG Warriors, but I didn't like Three Hopes. But I've been told Three Hopes sort of fixes things. Is this true? At the very least, Claude doesn't get sidelined as badly as he does in Three Houses. Also, the recycling. I did some calcs, and Engage has more maps than Three Houses, and has like 60 chapters without including paralogs. So the recycled maps, if the maps played significantly differently, I wouldn't mind it. Because people talk about how the Fates trilogy also recycles maps, but it just recycles the maps. The enemy formations change so much that they really recontextualize it, right? So, like, for example, Birthright, Conquest, and Rev all send you into the Rainbow Sages Tower. But those maps play so differently from each other. In Conquest, you're facing all these unpromoted enemies, and sort of getting, like, each room has its own gimmick moments. In Birthright, you face, like, the funny stats. And then in Rev, it's a mixture of promoted and unpromoted units separated out right after you get a bunch of training projects that you want to train up, right? So each of the maps feels really different. And the same is true for, like, Conquest Chapter 10 versus Rev 14, where Conquest 10 is a really tight defense map, where you're fighting against, like, specific skill formations and the water gets drained. And then Rev 14 is a really tight route map, where you are fighting against mostly knights and paladins on the right and fighters on the left. And you want different people to handle different things, and you just got access to the effective weapons, which are the best way to handle generals and paladins, right? So a lot of the map, I mean, Conquest, the Conquest map where you clone yourself versus the Rev map where you clone yourself play very, very different from each other. One of them is just there to train up Gunter and Corrin. The other one, you want to try to get as many items as you can, because you can deploy a full team, but you have to, like, kill a bunch of people who are hard to reach to get items. The Birthright version of the Dragonfall Fort versus the Conquest version of the Dragonfall Fort, where in Birthright, you're facing hordes of Faceless that keep spawning every single turn, and you use the Dragon Veins to turn off the swamps. In Conquest, there's a very tight, specific number of enemies you fight, and they've got tricky formations, the Shining Bow guy, Justice for Haitaka. Yeah, Haitaka's in that map, too. I would say Arcanea and Altana castle maps also. Yeah, Arcanea is another one where FE1 and FE3 Book 2 use the same maps, but the context is so different that it really shows how the map's geometry itself is not the only thing that matters. And with that in mind, I'm gonna plug a ROM hack that I think is a perfect example of this. An unexpected caller. An unexpected caller FEU. So I'm gonna push this in chat, the link. Every single map in this ROM pack is from Fire Emblem 6, 7, or 8, geographically. But the enemy layouts have been so drastically altered that they don't play anything like the map they're based off of. The objectives have also been changed. So, for example, Battle Before Dawn is now an escape map, where your army starts near where Zephiel begins, and you need to escape, like Thracia escape, out to where the FE7 army normally starts, right? As a person making an FE ROM hack, enemy placement is like 90% of map design. Yeah! Enemy placement and objective choice. I really liked an unexpected caller, and I think it is a really good example of how sort of the criticism of reused maps, it's eating at something that is real, because a lot of Fire Emblem Three Houses maps do feel very similar because, it's the same geography and similar or identical enemy placement. I think also part of it is just the maps get reused so much as to feel excessive. Because there's a limit to the number of times you can do it before it just feels like too much. But like, you know, with the Fates trilogy, you play each of those maps 3 times at most, and usually it's only once or twice. Rev Fuga versus Conquest Fuga, 2 different versions of the same map, very, very different from each other. How did we get to this? How did we get to this? We were talking about fucking Kaga's racism, and I'm so fucking autistic. Just the natural flow of conversation across topics. Don't forget Birthright Fuga. It's a different map. Birthright Fuga's a different map. It's a desert map. We're talking about when the geography is identical. And the Birthright Fuga map, you do face Fuga in the story, but it's on a different map entirely. It's on a desert map. Whereas Conquest and Rev, you face them both in Wind Alley. The illusion of choice led us to Three Houses Discourse. The illusion of choice did lead us to Three Houses Discourse, but the reality of autism led us to talking about Fire Emblem ROM hacks, because that's all I know how to do.